The late afternoon sun hung low over Route 12 as Colonel Morgan Keaton eased her government-grade Charger onto the open road, Fort Greystone's squat concrete silhouette shrinking in her rearview mirror. She drove in plain clothes, no crisp uniform, no badge on display, its civilian plates and darkened windows shielding her true identity. Every tinted pane and mirrored lens was deliberate, a last line of defense against prying eyes. Outside, the Virginia countryside stretched in rippling bands of golden shadow, the humid air clinging to the glass, even as the air conditioning fought to hold the cabin at a comfortable chill. Sorry to interrupt the story. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us get closer to 1,000 subscribers. It means the world to us. Thank you so much. Morgan's thoughts drifted back to that interminable briefing in the echoing halls above her generals jockeying for advantage, polished reports masking a festering rot. She'd listened as each officer defended his turf, trading auburn glances and half-spoken threats, while the real danger went unspoken. It wasn't overseas. It wasn't some distant insurgency. It was here, woven into the very fabric of domestic security, a hidden network of extremist sympathizers wearing the same badges meant to protect. Her assignment with the Joint Counter-Infiltration Division was classified to the point of erasure track, them map their cells, dismantle their operation from within. Every phone line she'd tapped, every encrypted message she'd decrypted, brought her closer to faces she could never name in daylight. This road trip, though, was purely her own, a chance to gather her thoughts before the sun dipped below the tree line, and she dove back into the shadows of covert warfare. Ahead, the asphalt turned gray beneath flickering silhouettes of pine. Behind her curve of tinted glass lay a world of silent threats, and Colonel Keaton knew that at any moment that quiet could explode into violence. This was no routine patrol. It was a gamble of life and death played out one encrypted call at a time. And for Morgan Keaton, the stakes had never been higher. The Charger's tires whispered over gravel as it glided into the cool shade of towering pines, the afternoon humidity wrapping around Colonel Morgan Keaton like a damp cloak. Without warning, a state trooper's cruiser eased up behind her. No siren, no flashing lights, just the quiet confidence of crisp white uniforms and polished boots. She drew the Charger onto the shoulder, eased her window down, and rested both hands on the wheel, her posture composed. Sergeant Carlisle stepped forward, first his gaze fixed on her. "License and registration, ma'am," he said, voice polite but firm. Morgan produced a slim, matte black folder stamped with Department of Defense insignia, her vehicle's true registration, and slid it across the dash. "These plates are issued under special clearance," she explained evenly. "They won't appear in civilian records." Behind Carlisle, Officer Caldwell loomed, pretending to inspect the Charger's taillights, while his eyes tracked her every movement in the mirror. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, a silent contest of authority versus anonymity. Morgan's heartbeat remained steady, an anchor in the brewing storm. "On what legal basis am I being asked to exit my vehicle?" she inquired, her tone measured, but edged with steel. Carlisle faltered, brow creasing. He glanced back at Caldwell, searching for reinforcement in that cool mirrored gaze. But no words came. Only the weight of the forest and the faint hum of the cruiser's idling engine answered her. In that pregnant pause, Morgan and the troopers existed in a suspended moment, two worlds colliding, one defined by unquestioned power, the other by a quiet refusal to be erased. Under the dappled canopy, the Charger's darkened cabin held its secret tight, its driver unmoved by the performance of authority unfolding outside. Colonel Keaton knew well that this was no routine traffic stop. It was the opening gambit in a hidden war, one fought in shadows and code where every question asked and every second silence carried far more weight than any siren's blast. Tension snapped, taut, as Carlisle leaned in again, voice low but insistent. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Morgan's eyes didn't waver. "I've complied with every lawful request," she said evenly, presented valid credentials and explained the plate situation. "There's no legal basis to force me from my car without a formal detention." A smirk crossed the young trooper's face, his own badge of unchecked authority. Behind him, Officer Caldwell shifted closer, fingers grazing the grip of his holstered sidearm as though drawn by magnetic impulse. No words passed between them, only a charged silence that crackled in the humid air. The forest around Route 12 stood witness tall pines dark against the afternoon sky, not a soul in sight. Morgan's hands hovered lightly on the wheel, knuckles relaxed despite the weight of the moment. Each breath she took was calm, precise, drawing strength from the cool veneer of her military-issued black folder. Beneath her jacket lay the insignia of a full-bird colonel, concealed but never forgotten. The Charger itself was no mere car, but a mobile command center armored in secrecy, its tinted windows and DoD plates a silent testament to hidden wars fought in coded whispers. She met Carlyle's gaze in the rearview mirror, her voice steady as steel. "If you wish to remove me, you must show me the law that allows it." His jaw clenched, and for a heartbeat it seemed he would balk. But then Caldwell cleared his throat, the faint echo of authority he knew he was grasping at. The duo pressed in closer, a human wedge aimed at extracting her from the driver's seat, yet Morgan remained a still point in their storm of bluster. On that lonely stretch of highway, power was being tested in a wordless duel. Carlyle and Caldwell assumed their badges granted absolute dominion. Morgan Keaton, Colonel Covert Intelligence Officer, knew better. Here behind the wheel of her Charger, defiance wasn't an act of rebellion, but an exercise of hard-earned rights. And she was determined to see this encounter through on her own terms. Without warning, Carlyle yanked the door open and slammed it against Morgan's thigh. She didn't flinch or abandon her seat. Instead, she twisted halfway out, elbow raised in a guarded arc, her gaze steely enough to break glass. That was a mistake. In an instant, Caldwell hissed, baton raised, stepping in close behind her. His shadow loomed over the open door frame, a silent promise of force. Yet Morgan's left hand darted into the console's recessed fingers, finding the hidden switch. A soft click, and the Charger's covert recorder whirred to life, its red LED, a tiny beacon in the dim cabin. All around them, the forest held its breath. No radios crackled, no sirens wailed, and only the steady thrum of the troopers' engines and the distant rustle of pine needles. Morgan kept her posture unbroken, back pressed against the seat, one hand still on the wheel. Each muzzle flash of tension hardened the air, compressing the gap between power and its pushback. Carlyle and Caldwell, advanced authority painted on their uniforms in perfect lines, but Morgan Keaton was neither suspect nor passenger. She was a directive in motion. She met Caldwell's eyes in the mirror, and though his baton twitched with intent, her expression was a blade calm, unyielding, ready to draw blood if crossed. Behind the layered tint of her rear view, the DoD plates glinted like a promise of reprisal. This was no typical roadside stop. Outside, the gravel crunched beneath anxious boots. Inside, the recorder captured every breath, every stutter of their protocol, every heartbeat pinned in time. Carlyle's next move would be broadcast archived and analyzed, proof that authority knew no immunity when wielded against the wrong target. In that shadowed standoff, Colonel Morgan Keaton had already won the first battle. She remained seated fortress in steel and glass, daring them to escalate. For in her hands, wrapped around the wheel, lay not just control of the Charger, but the truth they could not silence. Officer Caldwell snarled and plunged his baton into the chest of Morgan's field jacket, pressing down with deliberate force. Her body jerked, but instead of panic, she pivoted at the waist, ducking low behind the wheel, both hands clamped tight around the leather rim. Then with a smooth, controlled motion, she drove her elbow back into Caldwell's midsection, not to strike, but to force him off balance and break his intrusive advance. At that moment, Sergeant Carlyle lunged, grabbing the steering column in a bid to yank her from the driver's seat. Morgan locked her feet against the metal footwell heels, digging in, like anchors, braces the seat with every sinew. The Charger shuddered under the strain of their tug-of-war. Each muscle in her back hummed with purpose. Each heartbeat hammered a warning. The standoff shattered in a single ear-splitting crack. A pistol shot fired at dangerously close range tore into Morgan's side. The world fractured in that instant. Pain exploded through her ribs, a searing bolt that stole her breath and sent her body folding against the seat. Hot blood blossomed across her blouse, flooding toward her lap and pooling between her legs. Caldwell and Carlyle froze, eyes widening in shock. The baton dropped from Caldwell's numb hand. Carlyle recoiled, his assault interrupted by the thunderous recoil of violence. For an electrifying moment, there was nothing but the echo of the shot and the ragged sound of Morgan's ragged inhale. The forest beyond the cruiser stood motionless, as if holding its breath at the cruelty of a single wrong turn. Morgan Keaton slumped against the wheel, each breath a labor. Yet even in the haze of agony, her gaze remained unbowed, cold, precise, and fiercely alive. She was no longer a passive target, but a warrior wounded her cause carved in crimson. And as the echo of the shot faded into the dusk, two things became painfully clear. This roadside confrontation would not end here, and the truth recorded on the hidden console would outlive every siren's silence. Colonel Keaton's eyes fluttered open to the antiseptic glare of the military medical bay. Two men in black suits loomed at the foot of her bed, watchful as sentinels. The chief medical officer, face drawn and tired, cleared his throat. "We've stabilized your internal injuries, ma'am. You're out of immediate danger." Pain lanced through her side, but Morgan swallowed it down. She met the suit's polished shoes with an unblinking stare and croaked, "Show me the full Dashcam footage from the charger." The taller man, his shoulders rigid as guardrails, swiped a slim tablet from his coat pocket. With a few swift taps on its encrypted interface, the interior camera's feed flickered onto the screen, her crisp uniform. The mirrored windows, the baton raised, then the crack of the pistol. Every word, every gunshot echo, every dropped baton was preserved in cold digital clarity. Neither suit offered a word of apology. Instead, the shorter one's lips thinned. "Command has ordered this matter classified. No further inquiry." A taut hush fell over the room. Morgan could taste the sterile tang of disinfectant on her tongue, hear the muted beeps of monitors, feel the weight of policy pressing against her ribcage. "Classified," she repeated, voice low, but unbowed. "Then why was I shot?" They exchanged a glance, a silent pact between them. The chief medical officer shifted his clipboard, avoiding her gaze. Behind his pressed white coat lay the same choice: protect the institution or defend the truth. Morgan inhaled the hiss of her own breath, sounding impossibly loud. Laws were written to deliver justice, yet here justice had been kneecapped by secrecy. Beneath the roar of hidden agendas, she recognized the cold reality power had elected to bury the evidence, not pursue accountability. Lying on that crisp white bed, Colonel Morgan Keaton understood every system could be weaponized by those too afraid to reveal their mistakes, and she knew her fight was far from over. As the black suit envoy slipped through the door, Naomi Carlisle, a longtime confidant and fellow covert operative, stepped forward, her expression carved from stone. "They've buried every report, labeled this a routine incident, and moved on," she said quietly, closing the door behind them. "Are you prepared to let them get away with it, Morgan?" His gaze hardened. Even through the fog of painkillers, her eyes shone with resolve. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "I'll build the case myself." She swung her legs over the side of the hospital bed, testing the dull ache in her side like a live wire. "I need a secure server, air-gapped, encrypted, end-to-end, hosted off-site. Get me a burner laptop with full forensic toolkits. Then I want every traffic camera feed along Route 12 for the past 48 hours. From the rest stop north of Pine Ridge to the intersection at Devil's Fork." Naomi nodded, already pulling a compact tablet from her pocket. "I've got clearance to tap local municipal feeds through our backlog channel. I'll set up an isolated VPN and mirror the data in real time." Morgan swung her feet down again and let them touch the floor, steadying herself. "We'll cross-reference license plates, timestamps, even tire tracks if we have to. Then I want every internal thread I've flagged, those private law enforcement forums, encrypted messenger groups, witness affidavits from the sheriff's office leak. Pull everything." Outside, machinery hummed. Inside, a different kind of engine roared to life. Brick by brick, bite by bite, they would expose the cover-up. Naomi's fingers flew over the screen, routing orders through shadow networks and burner aliases. "This isn't just about a single bullet," Morgan said, voice low but fierce. "It's about every officer who thought they could hide behind a badge, and every system that lets them." Naomi paused in her typing, glancing up with fierce loyalty. "I'll have the traffic logs ready before dawn," she promised. Morgan leaned back, hand pressed lightly to her side. Every inhale still seared, but her determination was unbroken. In that subdued hospital room, a war of data and secrets had begun, and Colonel Keaton would not rest until the truth drove every lie into the light. By month 8, Morgan and Naomi were parked in the dead of night, half a mile from Crimson House, a secluded farmhouse lined with razor wire and shadowed sentinels. In the cramped surveillance van's glow, Naomi scanned thermal feeds patrols weaving along the perimeter watchtowers rotating under moonless sky. The drone's infrared camera painted the compound in molten reds and oranges, 5 figures milling in a makeshift conference room, rows of hard drives stacked on metal shelves, a detailed map linking precincts to individuals. Every flicker of heat and motion traced a hidden network of law enforcement collaborators. Morgan pressed a finger to her lips, then tapped her earpiece. "Teams in position," she whispered. They moved with choreographed precision, Naomi cutting power to external lights, Morgan planning silent charges at the reinforced door's hinges. Within minutes, the entryway swung open with barely a whisper. Inside, the air was heavy with the drone of illicit transmissions. They advanced like surgeons, rifles low-scanning each corner. The first room revealed a command center laptops looped into a grid of live feeds, desktop tags displaying officer Schreier IDs and clandestine meeting schedules. Morgan's heart pounded as she photographed the evidence with a bolt-action camera, its flash subdued for minimal disturbance. Down the hall, Naomi dropped to her knees and clipped a hard drive to her vest. The device contained raw intercepts, encrypted communications between precinct commanders and extremist cells. Meanwhile, Morgan secured printed manifestos and promotion lists, proof that these were no rogue bad apples, but a coordinated cell within the shield of authority. Their exfiltration was as swift as the breach. Charges sealed behind them, the pair melted back into the night's embrace, leaving Crimson House in stunned silence. As the drone lifted to circle above its infrared eye, continued to feed data capturing the compound's newly exposed vulnerabilities. By dawn, Morgan and Naomi would have every piece of the puzzle. The hidden framework of corruption, precinct lines, officer badges, secret agendas had been laid bare. In the war between truth and concealment, this night's operation was a decisive strike, shattering the facade and forcing the rot into the light. The raid climaxed in the private hangar where Gavin Carlisle, the local commander of the covert operation, was making his final escape. As he fumbled for his carry-on in the back of a waiting turboprop, Morgan sprinted across the tarmac, her suppressed sidearm trained on him. One precise shot to the elbow sent the weapon arm jerking uselessly away, and she closed the distance in 2 long strides. Carlisle dropped to one knee, clutching at the welt blooming across his skin, just as Naomi yanked open the overhead hatch and hauled free the Sentinel hard drive, its encrypted contents the linchpin of the entire extremist network. Meanwhile, Grant Bishop, the architect of the domestic insurgency, leapt into the cockpit and fired up the engines. Naomi called for the drone strike, her voice crisp over comms. "Target the portside engine now." The whump of the precision-launched micro-munition ripped through the hangar door and punched into the turboprop's turbine. It exploded into a cascade of fire and shrapnel, halting Bishop's escape in one deafening moment. He tumbled from the cockpit, scrambling away into the darkness, but his getaway aircraft was a smoldering wreck. On the ground, tactical teams moved in to detain 17 suspects, officers, informants, and shadowy facilitators alike, handcuffed in pairs beneath the hangar's flaring lights. In the compound's sub-basement, 2 children, pale and wide-eyed, were escorted from a dim, damp cell by a rescued schoolteacher turned witness. She clutched their hands as she led them up the ramp, tears of relief and trauma mingling on her cheeks. By dawn's first light, the evidence cataloged every hard drive dossier and intercepted communique, laid bare the network's anatomy precinct. Lines redrawn into terracells, promotion rosters used as recruitment pipelines, closed forums mapped to police dispatch channels. The operation had been ruthless gunfire echoing baton strikes unanswered, hearts pounding but surgical in its precision. Colonel Morgan Keaton stood amid the aftermath, chest heaving, eyes steeled. The day's work had shattered the illusion of impregnable authority within domestic security. The rot that had thrived in shadows was now strewn across hangar floors and sealed in federal evidence lockers. And as the embers from Bishop's crippled turboprop cooled, Morgan knew the real reckoning had only just begun. The next morning's headlines cracked the silence. Domestic terrorism charges filed against Carlisle Caldwell and the architect himself, Bishop. Federal warrants splashed their names across every legal bulletin, yet in the marble halls of power action stalled. The Justice Department issued a guarded statement. Whispers of jurisdictional tugs and ongoing review, which grew louder than any promise of swift justice. By noon, Colonel Keaton's official credentials were quietly revoked, an unceremonious end to her formal duties. But Mason Keaton, once pulled from her charger at gunpoint, refused to disappear. That afternoon, she met with Naomi Carlisle, Owen Hartman, and Detective Sabrina Morales in a nondescript townhouse near the Capitol. Together, they handed sealed evidence packets to independent journalists known for fearless reporting. They released raw footage of the Route 12 stop, unedited drone scans of Crimson House, and files mapping precincts to extremist operatives. No staged press conferences, only drop USB drives, secure messages, and a simple plea: see the truth. By evening, social media was alight. Citizens streamed the footage, legal scholars dissected the chain of command failures, and community groups organized town hall sessions demanding accountability. The lonely stretch of highway where Morgan had been shot became a symbol. Route 12 stood for every silence that nearly cost a life. Colonel Keaton watched it all unfold from the back of a quiet cafe, a cup of black coffee in hand. She did not seek praise or medals. She needed only one thing: the truth blazing, clear enough to pierce through bureaucratic stone walls. The shadow war against hidden corruption was far from over. But the moment authority froze at the barrel of her Charger's dash cam, that moment had ignited a relentless wave of exposure and unyielding struggle. In the glare of public scrutiny, the rot could no longer hide. And as long as the truth burned bright, her fight would go on silent, steadfast, and undeterred. From the clandestine battle against institutional corruption, we learn that justice never arrives unaided. It must be carried on our shoulders, fought for with perseverance, courage, and informed action. This story reminds us that even when the system remains silent, voices brave enough to record, to speak out, and to expose the truth can become beacons piercing through the darkness that blinds the public. Were I in the protagonist's shoes, I would not stop at uncovering a single case. I would go on to establish community forums, forge alliances with legal aid organizations and independent media, ensuring no shadow remains to conceal wrongdoing. I would champion bias awareness training, propose policy reforms, and pressure authorities to transparently publish every step of their investigations. Will racial discrimination vanish entirely by 2050? Hope remains alive, but we must not delude ourselves that it will simply fade away. This is a journey demanding steadfast commitment, collective solidarity across all social strata, and systemic change at the root. Until every individual, whether in uniform or plain clothes, recognizes that human dignity must never be weighed on the scales of prejudice, the fight against racism will continue.